In this episode, we are moving into one of the most important ideas in the information systems auditing process, because an audit does not begin with testing or reporting. It begins with deciding where attention should go and why. And that is exactly where risk-based audit planning becomes so valuable for a learner preparing for the Certified Information Systems Auditor, CISA, certification. A beginner can easily imagine audit planning as a calendar exercise where teams simply schedule work across the year, but real planning is far more thoughtful than that. It is the process of deciding which areas deserve review first, which ones may wait, and how the organization's most meaningful technology risks should shape audit priorities. That matters because no audit function has unlimited time, unlimited people, or unlimited budget, and no organization can afford to examine everything with the same level of effort. Risk-based planning helps the auditor focus on what matters most, connect audit activity to business reality, and make sure the work being performed has the greatest possible value for leadership and the organization as a whole. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At its simplest, risk-based audit planning means that audit work is selected and designed according to risk rather than convenience, habit, or personal preference. Risk, in this context, is the possibility that something important could go wrong and create harm for the organization, whether through financial loss, service disruption, regulatory trouble, damaged reputation, inaccurate reporting, or weakened protection of information. When planning is risk-based, the auditor asks where those possibilities are greatest, where controls appear weakest, where change is occurring quickly, and where the business would suffer most if a process failed. That way of thinking is essential because organizations depend on many systems and processes at the same time, but not all of them carry the same exposure or the same importance. A weak approval step in one area may be inconvenient, while a similar weakness in another area may threaten payroll accuracy, customer trust, or recovery from a disaster. Risk-based planning exists to recognize those differences early so audit attention goes where it can protect the organization most effectively. This approach matters because auditing without a risk foundation can become shallow, repetitive, and disconnected from business need. If an audit team simply repeats last year's schedule without asking what has changed, it may spend time examining low-impact areas while missing new risks created by system changes, vendor dependence, cloud migration, staffing turnover, or rapid business expansion. If planning is driven only by management comfort, the audit function may avoid sensitive but important areas and end up reinforcing a false sense of control. If planning is based only on what is easiest to review, the organization may receive many reports but very little real assurance about its most significant exposures. Risk-based planning prevents that drift by forcing the auditor to step back and ask what truly deserves attention now. It makes the audit function more relevant because the work is tied to what could actually harm the organization. It also makes the audit function more credible because leaders are more likely to value audit results when they can see a clear connection between the plan and the risks the business is trying to manage. A key starting point in this kind of planning is understanding the organization itself. Before an auditor can decide what is risky, the auditor needs to understand what the business does, how it uses technology, which processes are critical, what information is sensitive, what obligations the organization must meet, and where failure would have the greatest consequences. This means risk-based planning is never purely technical. It requires business awareness. A healthcare organization, a bank, a manufacturer, and a software company may all use information systems, but their critical processes, regulatory pressures, and operational dependencies may look very different. The auditor therefore needs context before making judgments about priority. That context can come from strategy documents, prior audits, discussions with management, incident history, process maps, system inventories, and awareness of the external environment. For beginners, this is an important lesson because it shows that audit planning is not just a matter of knowing control concepts. It is also a matter of knowing the organization well enough to see where technology risk has the greatest business meaning. Another core idea is the audit universe, which is the broad collection of auditable areas the organization might eventually need to examine. You can think of it as the full landscape from which audit priorities are selected. The audit universe may include business applications, infrastructure, cybersecurity processes, third-party services, data management activities, change management, disaster recovery, governance functions, and many other areas where risk and control matter. This concept is useful because it reminds the auditor that planning begins with visibility. If important parts of the organization are missing from the auditor's view, then the plan may look organized while still leaving large areas unexamined. A strong audit universe does not mean every item will be audited every year. It means the planning process starts from a reasonably complete picture of what could be reviewed. Once that picture exists, the auditor can begin comparing those areas according to risk, business importance, known weaknesses, and other factors that affect priority. Without that foundation, planning can become reactive and incomplete instead of intentional and enterprise-aware. Once the universe of auditable areas is understood, the next step is risk assessment, which is the heart of risk-based planning. The auditor considers factors that help estimate where risk is higher, lower, rising, or changing. These factors often include the significance of the process to the business, the sensitivity of the information involved, recent changes to systems or staff, the strength or maturity of controls, prior audit findings, recent incidents, management concerns, regulatory exposure, and dependence on vendors or complex technology. The auditor is not trying to predict the future with perfect precision. Instead, the goal is to make a reasoned judgment about which areas deserve closer attention because the chance of weakness or the impact of failure appears greater. For beginners, this matters because risk assessment is not guesswork and it is not a dramatic exercise in fear. It is a structured comparison that helps the audit function decide where its effort will have the most value. The planning process becomes much stronger when those decisions are based on clear factors rather than intuition alone. Likelihood and impact are two of the most common ideas used in thinking about risk, even when the planning process does not become highly mathematical. Likelihood asks how plausible it is that a problem, failure, or control breakdown could occur. Impact asks how serious the consequences would be if it did occur. A process with frequent changes, weak oversight, and many manual steps may carry a higher likelihood of error or control failure. A process that affects financial reporting, legal compliance, or major customer-facing systems may carry higher impact because problems there could create serious damage for the organization. Risk-based planning often becomes clearer when both dimensions are considered together because an area with modest impact and modest likelihood may not deserve the same attention as one with either very high impact or a dangerous combination of both. Beginners should remember, though, that these judgments do not need to be reduced to formulas in order to be useful. The real value comes from thinking clearly about where failures are more likely, where consequences are greater, and how those two realities should shape audit priorities. Control maturity also has an important place in planning because risk is not just about the inherent importance of a process. It is also about how well the organization appears to manage that process today. A critical system with strong governance, regular monitoring, disciplined change control, and a history of stable performance may still be important, but it may present a different audit priority from a similarly critical system with unclear ownership, weak documentation, poor evidence of review, or recent operational problems. This does not mean mature areas should be ignored forever, because even strong environments still need periodic assurance. It does mean that control condition matters when choosing where to focus effort. A risk-based plan looks not only at what would hurt the business if it failed, but also at how much confidence the organization can currently justify. For a beginner, this is a helpful distinction because it shows that risk is not determined by importance alone. It is shaped by the relationship between business value, control quality, change, and uncertainty. Planning becomes smarter when those dimensions are considered together instead of in isolation. Change is one of the strongest signals in risk-based audit planning because change often introduces uncertainty faster than organizations realize. A new application, a migration to a cloud platform, a merger, a major vendor transition, a restructuring of responsibilities, or even a rush of new hiring can weaken controls that once seemed stable. Processes that worked well under old conditions may not work as well after technology, scale, or ownership has shifted. This is why a plan based only on historical comfort can quickly become outdated. The auditor needs to watch for areas where the environment is moving, because movement tends to increase the chance that assumptions are no longer accurate. Even if a formal incident has not yet happened, rapid change can justify audit attention simply because the organization may be relying on controls that were designed for a different reality. Beginners should hear this clearly because many exam questions reward awareness of what has changed. Risk-based planning is not only about what has gone wrong already. It is also about where present conditions suggest that the chance of future weakness is rising. Stakeholder input is another important ingredient, but it must be used carefully. Management, process owners, security leaders, compliance teams, and operational staff often have useful information about where problems are emerging, where controls feel fragile, or where the organization is under pressure. Their input can help the auditor see changes, pain points, or blind spots that do not appear clearly in documentation alone. At the same time, risk-based planning should not become a popularity contest where the loudest voices control the audit agenda. Management may want attention on certain areas because they are already comfortable discussing them, while avoiding areas that are politically sensitive or likely to reveal larger weaknesses. The auditor must therefore listen without surrendering judgment. Stakeholder insight is valuable because it adds context and practical knowledge, but final prioritization must still reflect objective risk thinking. For beginners, this is another sign that audit planning combines information gathering with professional independence. The plan should be informed by the organization, yet not captured by the preferences or anxieties of any one part of it. From there, planning moves toward prioritization and scheduling. This is where the audit function translates risk understanding into an actual plan for what will be reviewed and when. A high-risk area may deserve a near-term audit, a focused assessment, or increased follow-up, while a lower-risk area may be deferred, reviewed less often, or monitored through lighter oversight. Timing matters because risk-based planning is not only about choosing the right topics. It is also about choosing the right sequence. An area facing active change or heightened external pressure may need attention sooner than an equally important area that is more stable. Resource limits also matter here, since the best plan is not the one that promises to examine everything. It is the one that aligns effort realistically with the risks that matter most. For a beginner, this is where planning becomes tangible. The process moves from broad understanding to practical action, but the underlying principle remains the same. Audit effort should flow toward significance, uncertainty, and potential harm, not simply toward routine or ease. Risk-based planning also exists at more than one level. There is broad audit planning, often tied to a yearly or periodic view of the organization, and there is engagement-level planning, which focuses on a specific audit once it has been selected. The broad plan helps the audit function decide which areas deserve review across the enterprise. Engagement planning then narrows the focus inside one chosen area by identifying objectives, scope, criteria, risks, and likely sources of evidence for that particular audit. This distinction matters because selecting the topic is only the first planning decision. Once an area is chosen, the auditor still needs to ask which parts of that area carry the greatest risk, which control points matter most, and what evidence will best support a sound conclusion. A learner who understands this connection sees that risk-based thinking does not stop once the audit is placed on the calendar. It continues throughout the engagement. The same logic that helps choose the right audit also helps choose the right questions, the right testing, and the right level of depth once the work begins. There are several common misconceptions that can weaken understanding of this topic if they are not corrected early. One misconception is that risk-based planning means ignoring everything except the most dramatic threat. In reality, good planning balances major exposures with coverage needs, recurring obligations, and the practical need to maintain visibility across the organization over time. Another misconception is that risk-based planning is only about cybersecurity threats. Cybersecurity may be a major factor, but planning also considers governance weaknesses, operational breakdowns, third-party dependence, failed change control, data quality, resilience, and many other risks connected to information systems. A third misconception is that once a plan is approved, It should remain fixed no matter what happens. Strong planning is disciplined, but it is also responsive. If the organization suffers a major incident, launches a critical new system, or faces a major regulatory change, the plan may need to adapt. For beginners, these misconceptions are important because they show that risk-based planning is structured without being rigid and strategic without being blind to new realities. A simple example can make the whole idea easier to hold in mind. Imagine an organization with 3 possible audit targets. One is a stable internal scheduling system with limited business impact. Another is a payroll platform that recently underwent major changes and affects every employee. The third is a disaster recovery process that has not been fully tested in a long time and would become essential during a major outage. Risk-based audit planning would not treat all 3 areas the same. The auditor would likely see that payroll and disaster recovery deserve stronger attention because the business impact of failure is high and current uncertainty is meaningful. The scheduling system might still belong in the audit universe, but it would likely rank lower unless other warning signs appeared. This kind of reasoning is exactly what the planning process is designed to support. It shows that planning is not an abstract theory. It is a practical method for deciding where assurance work can do the most good and where limited audit resources should be applied first. As we close, the most important thing to carry forward is that risk-based audit planning is the discipline of aiming audit effort where it matters most. It starts with understanding the organization, building visibility through the audit universe, assessing risk factors, considering likelihood and impact, noticing control maturity and change, listening to stakeholders without surrendering independence, and turning all of that into thoughtful priorities and timing. The result is not just a schedule. It is a reasoned plan that helps the audit function stay relevant, focused, and valuable in a world where systems, threats, and business demands are always moving. For someone new to the CISA journey, this is a foundational idea because it explains why audit work should never be random. Strong planning ensures that the right questions are asked in the right places at the right time. Once that principle is understood, the rest of the audit process becomes easier to follow because you can see that good assurance starts long before testing begins. It starts with choosing wisely where attention belongs.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.